Look now at Galatians chapter 5 with me, please. Galatians 5 in verse 1. Galatians is an amazing epistle. In fact, Martin Luther called it the Magna Carta, the great, great document for us. But it reveals in chapter 5, verse 1, that Christ is our liberty. This is what 5:1 says, "Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and do not be entangled again with the yoke of bondage." Specifically, he's talking about the yoke of bondage of the whole Jewish law, code, their endless regulations, their feast days, their worship days, their new moons, their harvests, their diets, their all that stuff. But he continues and goes beyond that and talks about the bondage that comes of the flesh. Now, I don't think most of us have a problem with, not eating pork and stuff like that, but I think it's very easy for us to get entangled with the flesh. And that's why in chapter 5, a little bit later, if you notice in verse 19, Paul says, "These are the deeds of the flesh," and he lists off 15 problems that we face if we're not careful. And what's interesting is that if you look through that list, more than half of them, 8 out of the 15, have to do with difficulties getting along with people. And if you want to know how spiritual you are, if you want to know how spirit-filled you are, how do you do getting along with people? Is there, and look at what he talks about there. Outbursts, enmities, strife, outbursts of anger, jealousy, disputes, dissensions, factions, envying. Those are interpersonal relationships, that middle 8. And that group tells us when the deeds of the flesh are rampant. And then, of course, gloriously, verse 22 talks about the fruit of the Spirit. And what's amazing is, and I'll read what's on your sheet, about AD 45, Paul wrote this from the Jerusalem Council. And Galatians was written to counter the false teaching about Christianity and the law and the relationship between faith and works. When the grace of God through His Spirit is rooted into our lives, we find His fruit. And His fruit reaches into these areas. Number 1, our walk with God will be affected. We will have love toward God. We will have joy of the Spirit, and we'll have the peace of God reigning in our life. It will affect, secondly, our walk with others. We will be gentle, good, and patient in our walk with others. And finally, our personal lives will exhibit faith, meekness, and self-control. So our walk with God, our walk with others, and our insides, how we deal with things, is going to be affected when His Spirit's fruit reaches into our hearts. And what a great book Galatians is.